We're back and we're thrilled to be joined by this week's Beast of the Week, Reid Hoffman. Reid is a pioneer in Silicon Valley. He's an entrepreneur, an investor, co-founder of LinkedIn, and he has a new book out, Super Agency: What Could Possibly Go Right with Our AI Future. We recorded this interview with Reid before the news about DeepSeek broke, but we had a very candid conversation about his latest ventures, including the exclusive Silicon Valley utopia he's helping to build outside San Francisco, and his scathing personal take on Elon Musk's character. Reid is so smart, he sometimes sounds like a wizard delivering prophecies from inside a volcano. It's not often you find someone who's as kind as he is rich, so we're lucky to have him, not just on the podcast, but in the world. Gosh, I'm sounding sincere this morning. It must
beautiful.
be all that English tea.
Reid, we're very excited to talk about your new book,
Yes.
Super Agency: What Could Possibly Go Right with Our AI Future. And we are going to come to your book, but it seems insane not to come to you first with your perspective of what's going on. We're recording this on the Friday after the inauguration. We've had the announcement of Stargate. We've got the new melding of the tech bros and Trump. You are in the heart of Silicon Valley. You're an extraordinary tech entrepreneur, and we would love your take on what the hell is going on.
Well, we definitely live in crazy times, and, we knew that anyway. My tendency is to actually be a little bit more optimistic, and not because there aren't serious concerns and serious worries. We've got the January 6th pardons. We got a whole bunch of other stuff. But it's actually been my point of view that we actually are remaking, we're in a cognitive industrial revolution, and that kind of technology is reshaping industries, society, et cetera. And we need to actually have a good coordination between the tech industry and, frankly, the government, any government. I think it's anywhere in the world and so forth. And so I think all of the pessimistic commentary misses some of the silver linings, because I think that kind of look, technology is going to be a really important part of the future. Like, the kinds of things that I hope for are better nuclear regulation, because that's actually where we get clean energy and kind of the unfortunate side effect of the anti-nuclear movement is coal plants and other kinds of things. So generally speaking, I maybe not as, kind of sounding the alarm as much as you might expect me to, given how much I, obviously put it all on the field to try to get, Kamala Harris elected.
Do you think that that's possible, though? Just kind of like given the Trump worldview and the people that he surrounds himself with. I mean, you are a person who thinks deeply about the subject of management. I mean, how to maintain an optimistic outlook when they're really calling on federal employees to rat each other out for equitable hiring. I mean, this is mismanagement on day 5. These are terrible ideas. How to bring out the silver lining? I mean, tell me, help me find it.
There's a long list, a long parade of horribles, the question around, how federal employees are being treated, the notion of the fact that I think that we don't want to roll back the civil rights movement, as an instance. You can say maybe DEI had some excesses here and there, but civil rights is extremely important. So there's just a long list of things that, frankly, it's depressing when you think of it. And so I think it's, that's challenging. This maybe I'm an incurable optimist from being an entrepreneur. And so, I tend to go, all right, well, what are the things we can do, no matter how dark and kind of broken things are, to try to build things to be better. And so, and I, kind of think that my responsibility, here, 4 days into the administration,
Right.
is to continue to try to do things that, kind of really help American society. And so, for me, that's, now doing more business, investing, AI, all the rest of this stuff. I'm regrouping to see if there's ends up being picking a fight with the administration. I'm pretty sure we'll get there at some point. But I'm trying not to 4 days in.
You said at the beginning that you put it all out there on the field to get Kamala Harris elected. Are you concerned about retribution?
Well, again, the incurable optimist in me is hopeful that everyone will get built into constructing the future. When I've called various people who I know who are going in the administration, say, no, that's not how we're going to roll. Now, obviously, there's various people who have promised retribution. Kash Patel, other kinds of folks. There's this whole range of things, and I think what was one of the headlines today was, the pardoned Proud Boys people are kind of promising retribution. So, I think
they want to get back. They want to get into government.
Yes.
They're saying they want jobs in the administration now.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and obviously taking people who physically stormed the Capitol building with the intent of killing Mike Pence and assaulting police officers and putting him in the administration is unfortunately a classic thing from 1930s fascism. So I'm hopeful that it won't happen. But again, in all of these things, I'm kind of waiting to see, what plays out.
I'm sensing that you're like, well, I'm just going to seed good ideas. I mean, that's my, in people's ears.
4 days in, that's what I'm trying to do. I mean,
Right.
At least give it a couple weeks.
Right. I noticed that you were not up on the dais, and I just want to say, like, isn't the point of being a billionaire that you don't have to lick someone else's boots? So really, why were so many of them up there? I felt debasing themselves, actually.
Well, again, I'm going to kind of go to the little bit of the silver lining, which is, they do operate within a country. We want the industry, the tech industry, all industries to be responsive to the local government. If you're asked to show up, I think you do. I was fortunately not asked, so didn't have to, kind of have this struggle of a question of how do I serve my country this way, and is this the kind of thing that I do? But if you're asked, I think generally speaking, you try to help the country, and this is the legitimately elected government for all of the worries that we have with what's going to be happening with rule of law and other things.
Right. It's impossible, actually, to leave Elon Musk out of this conversation. His presence is everywhere. His influence seems to be without guardrails. I mean, he recently defamed you. How do you wrestle with the amount of power and control that he has, and how he is choosing to wield that influence?
And also, you've known him for a long time because you are all part of the PayPal mafia.
Yes, a name that I adore. It's the criminal conspiracy.
It spawned an incredible set of entrepreneurs.
Yes. Yeah, I tend to use PayPal Network. It's less sexy, but it has less of a criminal undertone. I mean, PayPal is a great public company, and all the rest. Elon is this weird kind of dual vision. On one hand, an amazing entrepreneur, revitalizing multiple industries. Space, satellites, cars, and part of that is because he has a ability to convince himself that he has the absolute understanding of the truth, contrary to any data. And so I've seen it multiple times. I mean, for example, if you go back, politically, he was tweeting things around, Paul Pelosi was assaulted by an ex-gay prostitute who was angry with being paid. And it's like, where did you get this from? Like what gives you any sense of belief that this is actually, in fact, accurate? And it actually kind of goes on. And unfortunately, a lot of it's on Twitter. And unfortunately, some of it's directed to me. And it's, kind of deeply irresponsible because, there's a lot of crazy, violent people out there. And when you make aspersions, that are basically slanderous, completely out of, have zero factual basis, etc., it's kind of a call to those kind of crazy, violent people. And so, all of that stuff I kind of deeply regret. I wish he was more focused on the things, that he has done so amazingly, and not on the things that I think are, causing a lot of, pain and harm.
And how do you square that, Reed? Because I, like you, I'm more of an Elon optimist in terms of his extraordinary entrepreneurial abilities, but the X of it all really seems to be a very dark cloud to his otherwise incredible abilities. I mean, you've known him a long time. What has changed?
Part of it, what I was saying early, is that he is, he has this conviction that he sees the future with absolute clarity, and he kind of believes that he grasps the truth. That's part of the reason why he thought he could start SpaceX and make it work. That's part of the reason why he thought he could, put it all on the line and make, kind of Tesla work. But then when it crosses over into other things, so for example, he's, he's unhappy about the OpenAI stuff because, he made he made an initial really good choice, which is founding it. And then he was like, this isn't going to work unless it's a company that I completely control. So I'm leaving. And then it worked out and he's unhappy about it. And so then he throws various, kind of unbased, kind of completely, slanderous assertions at Sam Altman. He throws them at me. It's unfortunately the flip side of the coin. It's kind of like the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, kind of thing. And so, I obviously wish deeply he wouldn't. I think it's, immoral and irresponsible.
I feel like in the world where you make a really binary pros and cons list, the cons are very far outweighing the pros right now. It's a supernova burnout leadership style. I don't think it works. And I think his influence is too great and the horse is out of the barn. This need for attention is overriding everything. And I really welcome him to try to colonize Mars by himself anytime. hop on that rocket and go.
Occupy Mars. He wears the t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we want to talk about your book. And I have to say up front, and I'm sure that this is not a huge surprise to you, I'm kind of an AI doomer, not because I don't think that there's like zero upside, but just because I think there are enough bad actors in the space that whatever benefits it confers could be easily warped to serve the god of money. Can you just tell me that I'm wrong? Like, please, I'm looking for, it's not your job to reassure me, but we're here. So why not try?
Well, I'm always delighted to try.
Thank you.
Look, I mean, I do think that one of the things to never, it's part of human society that there's differences in power, there's differences in wealth. I don't know what human society looks like without that. I mean, to some degree, all three of us are folks who in different paths have led really extraordinary careers, and that is kind of differentially rewarding. And that happens. And so the fact that, kind of there will be some differential benefits, in any technology, including AI, to entities that have the power to construct them, the wealth to construct them, et cetera, will happen. And I don't mean I start with a kind of brass tacks to just make sure that it's not Pollyannish. But here is the thing where I think you get to a perhaps a reassuring thing. Think about the smartphones. Think about iPhones and Androids. You and I and the Uber driver and Tim Cook all have the same phone.
Mm-hmm.
Because when a technology gets developed for the use of hundreds of billions of people hundreds of millions and billions of people, then it's the natural play for these things is to be, kind of spread across the entire basis. And if you look at what's happening with the build of AI technology, like with ChatGPT, we're already at hundreds of millions. And so the ChatGPT I use is the same ChatGPT anyone else can use. And so that then gives you a broader range of inclusion that then, kind of, and the target for these companies and these creators is to be most successful at the hundreds of millions and billions, which means they have to be responsive to those people. So I don't know if you find that reassuring, but at least it's using the smartphones as a parallel kind of shows you that there's a much more, kind of equal access across the entire thing.
How do you account for bad actors then? Like, how do you solve for that? Because I'm just going to use Americans in general are not super sophisticated when it comes to like media criticism, and people are very vulnerable to misinformation and disinformation. We're not used to it. We don't live like our proximity to Russia. We're not close. Like, we're not as familiar with it as a lot of European countries who solve for that and educate people about disinformation. it's such a vulnerability for us as a general population to just get enraptured by things. And already in small ways, images are tricking people. I just feel like we're very easy targets here. And so, how can we ensure that it's enhancing human potential instead of making us totally dependent on it and kind of sitting ducks?
Well, by the way, we always do get dependent upon the new technologies that we
Right.
integrate in our lives. We're dependent on our phones, we're dependent on our cars, we're dependent on electricity. I mean, like dependence is actually not the right criteria. The right criteria is, kind of elevating the human condition. And, I do take very seriously and this is part of the reason I focused on agency with super agency, because part of human agency is, am I disempowered through like a kind of a sea of misinformation, what is, or jobs or privacy or other things, but to say that, hey, we can actually get to superpowers within human agency. And part of that is like, you think about like, okay, well, if we have really good AI assistants, because I think we're all going to have them in a small number of years, that can help us process the information we see. Because it's not just crazy information on the internet. As you know, there's crazy information on cable news and on talk radio and, all these other things. And so it's like, how do you help parse that? Well, if you have an agent that's kind of going, well, by the way, when this person is claiming that vaccines cause autism, they're actually, in fact, they're counter the entire medical field of studied practice on this. And so, make up your own mind. Anyway, so I think that kind of empowerment is when you think of where the problem is where the solution is. I think that's the kind of thing to always be thinking about with technology.
That is such a Reid Hoffmanism, where the problem is, there the solution is. So can we get down to sort of very basics here, Reid? Because I know that you live up in the clouds and you're referred to as the philosopher king of Silicon Valley. What does AI mean for me? In 5 years' time, what does it mean for my healthcare? And I have another question, which I'm really curious about, which is, in all of this, does AI change the nature of being a human? Or are we essentially sort of stable as creatures? I mean, I was trying to think back. I was having this discussion earlier this week with a friend about, are we the same as we were 2,000 years ago? We may be more sophisticated, but essentially, are we the same? Are we the same animal?
So those are two different questions. I'll answer
Yep.
them in order. So the first is very straightforward, which is one of the things that, kind of I hope with for example, administration that's kind of focusing on deregulation, is that we will move very quickly to a medical assistant on every smartphone that's available 24/7, that's better than your average GP. And that doesn't mean GPs will go out of work. There's all kinds of things for GPs to do, including having your medical assistant report, kind of say, hey, off the conversation I just had with you, Joanna, do you mind if I say this following things to your GP so that, the GP can help kind of work with you on them, et cetera. And obviously there's cases where people are uninsured, don't have access to a GP. Most people don't have access to a GP, a doctor at 11 p.m. on any evening unless they go to an emergency room. And I think that is line of sight. Like I already can see it's only kind of a regulatory legal liability issue that is the thing that stands in the way of that happening.
And that feels very exciting.
Yes, like huge in terms of and this, Sam, goes back to your earlier thing, which is like, by the way, that'll be great for, powerful people, and it'll be great for working class people, and it'll be great for unemployed people. It's like, it's good across the board. Now, the second one is more subtle and more difficult, and this is, you set it up with philosopher of Silicon Valley. One of the things that I've been thinking about in the last 8 years or so has been we're actually better described as Homo techne than Homo sapiens. And that
Interesting.
that may sound like, big words, but what it means is, as opposed to like we sit around like Rodin sculpture thinking, what we do is we change our nature through technology. Like we already are a little bit cyborgs with our smartphones, with our computers. And that changes the nature of how we parse the world, how we understand each other, how we communicate with each other. Cognition changes because, starting with like the invention of the printing press, memory was no longer like it used to be that really, oh, so-and-so is brilliant is because they had a great memory. Now, you don't really need a great memory. You just need to be able to find it. It's like, how do you do the agent query? How do you do the search query? And so, like, we evolve through our technology. So I think almost for sure, AI technology will help us evolve. And part of, going to be an incurable optimist the entire time during the podcast. Part of the opportunity for this is you say, well, say we have agents like Inflections Pi, the company that I co-founded with Mustafa Suleyman. It's Pi, it's personal intelligence. It's trained with EQ as importantly as with IQ. So it's kind, it's compassionate, it's interactions. And if you have those kinds of things there, we learn as human beings in part by how we're acculturated with the people around us. And that's an area where, for example, you say, hey, we have a billion agents, everyone has an agent, and the agent is trying to model kindness and compassion. That's got to be good.
I do notice that if I thank my chat GPT for doing something for me, or if I say, please, can you, it responds to me in kind and it feels much more human. I love your optimism about all this. Sam and she's a doomer, I'm a boomer on the whole thing.
I'm just naturally distrustful, and that has served me very well and continues to serve me very well because I'm very rarely disappointed.
Well, and I would just say as a European that Americans have a fantasy about the level of education that's going on in Europe. I grew up in the UK, as you know, and there was plenty of disinformation in the newspapers there. And when Rupert Murdoch arrived, there was even more. So I don't think America has a stranglehold on that. I love the idea that we are evolving, though, as humans, and that our memory is changing because we've got other sources of storage for information. What else do you predict is going to change about human nature and the way our brains work?
Well, another hope that I'd have from kind of AI agent training is kind of something that goes along cognitive diversity. Like the way that I use Pi and ChatGPT and Claude Sonnet and everything else is very often I'm saying, here's what I think. What's the counter argument? Or here's what I think, like, for example, with super agency, what would a historian of technology, how would she critique this, right? And that actually helps your thinking get a lot better. And if the agents just kind of nudge in that direction, because obviously we as human beings, speak about a human nature thing, have massive confirmation bias, right? So,
right.
Whether you're red, blue, anything else, it's like the tendency is to go to confirmation bias, and you have to be disciplined about like, okay, where is this accurate and where is it a confirmation bias? Kind of Sam, to your
Skepticism,
pessimism, concern. You can't get the future you want by eliminating the futures you don't want.
I think that's true. I think that's great, but I will say this. I need to say this. I think we need like guidelines. I think we need guardrails. I think that human beings have to be forced to do the right thing. We resist seatbelts. We resist, packaging on our cigarettes that tell us that they cause cancer. We resist things that are good for us. We have to be kind of forced to do. So there need to be people like you who have an optimistic vision of the future. I just think there are an equal measure of people who have who will take advantage of people. And so we need guardrails to like counter affect those people.
And let's face it, Reid, you have somewhere to go because you're one of the investors in this crazy new city near San Francisco. You can run off and leave us all behind if you want. What is the latest on, I can't remember what it's called, but it's where you've all got together and bought this land and are building a whole new life?
Well, California forever. It's in Solano County. It's, making good progress. And, who doesn't want a new city that has walkable paths and green energy and a bunch of other things? But by the way, I'm not going to run off there myself. I'm going to invite all my friends to come. Right.
Oh,
So
good.
if people want to come, but like building new cities is actually the kind of really big, ambitious thing that we should do more of. And when you think about it, it's like it brings economics. It can be designed from a viewpoint of being much better for a sharing economy and kind of transport. It can be much more human in terms of walkable and green areas. And that was part of the reason why I signed on to it. And I don't know exactly what's public, but they're making great progress.
Do we think that the benefits will outweigh the energy usage? Because there's like discussion of like that AI's energy usage was in part responsible for the wildfires in California. Like, how are we solving for that?
Well, this goes back to the kind of people trying to, get on a podium and yell very loudly when there's very little basis in any fact.
Okay.
If you think about it, it's something like, maximum 5% of energy currently is in data centers. And of that, maximum, call it 2% of that is currently the AI workloads. So the level of electricity that is currently being used is really not that much. Now, it could be growing exponentially, which is one of the reasons I asked the
Right.
question. But here's the thing. All of the hyperscalers are committed to and building massively green data centers. And part of how that benefits green energy across society is they're going in and making many billion-dollar commitments to like geothermal companies, solar companies, wind companies, et cetera, to say, hey, we need this for powering our data centers because we are essentially making this commitment to be green for all the incremental. And then, by the way, now that technology stood up, now it can be used for home heating and charging your AV and all the rest of the stuff. So that's one area where it's net positive. And then the other one is already Google's DeepMind, some 8 years ago, applied their algorithms on how to make the kind of Google data centers, which are already highly optimized, more efficient. They got a minimum of 15% more efficiency. Think if you're applying AI to grid efficiency. So this is, again, kind of like looking at what actually is going to happen and what you can build with this technology. But of course, people like to posture like I'm good climate person and those AI people are evil anti-climate people because it's using electricity and it's going to be terrible. And it's like, well, no, do your work.
Interesting.
Close observers will notice that I have got a Masters of Scale mug from your first ever live podcast, Reid Hoffman. Just saying.
As much as I'm a little
Yeah,
embarrassed by
so
the fact that it
nice.
sports an illustration of my face, I am very grateful.
It's all good. So just give us, before you go, if you were a betting man, what would you say the chances are of Stargate working?
I would say very high, because I think that the scale compute stuff really matters. Now, I think there's some other things like the CHIPS Act and other things that also need to be working well. But I think that the notion of building scale compute is one of the things that's going to be part of leadership in AI. And I think the plan is carefully crafted. So, I don't know. Entrepreneurship stuff is never greater than 80%, so maybe it's 50, but I think it's got a real shot.
And what about Doge? Again, if you were a betting man, Vivek Ramaswamy's already left the building. Or perhaps a better way of putting it is Trump versus Elon, who wins?
Well, I think in that case, Trump would win. I think that with Doge, what I'm hopeful for, look, we all want kind of that we know there's a huge amount of bureaucracy and a huge amount of waste in government. We all would like that to be refactored some. I would also like it to be refactored in a compassionate way. I think that just because you're doing some job and work refactoring doesn't mean you have to be, cruel about it. And so, maybe this is again my incurable optimism, but like I want the refactoring. I also would like it to be a little bit more, human.
I think we could take all of our life savings and just put it in Melania coins, Melania Trump meme coins, and we'll just be fine, right? That's how it works.
Will be best.
We
Yes.
will be best.
The best ever. Right.
Best
Yes.
ever. Yeah.
Reid Hoffman, thank you so much for your time. Good luck with your book.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much.